Hello, everyone, and welcome to another Directions Mag Geospatial webinar, today sponsored by our friends at NearMap. I'm Barbara Duke, Editor-in-Chief here at Directions Mag, with our webinar producer, Lynette Qualia. Thank you to the geospatial community for being our loyal friends for 25 years now. We hope that you'll continue to read feature articles, daily news, listen to podcasts, and of course, catch up on all those webinars. We are excited to have Mysti with us today. They have a wonderful collection of information and demos to look at how you can improve your workflow, specifically with your imagery. So welcome, Mysti. We are glad to have you with us today.
My name is Mysti Downing. I work at the Guadalupe-Blanco River Authority in Central Texas. I'm going to quickly kind of go over how we've set up our GIS and then talk about several use cases of how we're making use of the NearMap imagery. So a little bit about me. I've been working in GIS and water resources actually for about 17 years. I came to GBRA, the Guadalupe-Blanco River Authority, about 4 years ago. Before that, I was actually at another river authority here in Texas, the San Antonio River Authority, for 5 years. So it was an easy transition. The river authorities are unique, but they have a lot of similarities as well. And then previous to that, I worked mostly in conservation and environmental science. I do have 2 degrees in geography, got my master's in GIS at Texas State, and I am a GISP and a certified floodplain manager here in Texas. So a little bit about GBRA. As I mentioned, the river authorities in Texas are all a little unique. They have their own enabling legislation. So GBRA's focus is water resources and water and wastewater utility services, among other things. So I mostly want to mention what we do to indicate all the different ways that we are and could use GIS here at the River Authority. So we do water supply and distribution, wastewater collection services. That's our utility side of the business. And a lot of what I talk about will focus on that because it's one of our core lines of business. But we also have a series of small hydroelectric dams along the river. We operate a larger reservoir down closer to the coast of Texas. And we have a river diversion and surface canal system down along the coast in Calhoun County. As a river authority, it's not unusual to also operate parks and recreation. We have a few parks, and we do have an environmental sciences and water quality department. While we do provide utility services, water resource management and sustainability of water resources in the basin is also a concern. So we have environmental education programs, and we do community outreach. The map sort of on the left of the screen shows our 10-county jurisdiction. So we do cover a large chunk of Central Texas, and then the actual river basin boundary, watershed boundary of the Guadalupe River. So even though our jurisdiction doesn't fully cover the basin, we have a lot of activities, responsibilities, and influence even in those other parts of the watershed. This is just a screenshot of a dashboard that exists in one of our internal story maps called the Guad Squad report. It's sort of an overview of our facilities within our district. So we have 5 water treatment plants, 13 wastewater plants, parks, and the dams. This is sort of a brief timeline of using NearMap at GBRA. It corresponds as well with the history of GIS at GBRA. So I started in January of 2019. I was hired as the GIS Administrator. Previous to that, GBRA did not have a GIS program. So it was very exciting for me. I got to come and do a needs assessment and talk to all of the divisions and departments and decide how we were going to set up GIS and implement the program. Simultaneously with that, and the impetus for creating a GIS position was that GBRA was also starting a formalized asset management program. And so my very first day was a day-long workshop kicking off asset management. And I mention that because it's a very key part, not only of how we use GIS, but why Nearmap has been so useful for me. So that was in January. We spent a few months evaluating what was needed at GBRA and then really launched the GIS program that summer. This was outside of a budget cycle within our fiscal year. So I was lucky that I was able to purchase Enterprise GIS from Esri and get that set up. Moving into that first budget, I did immediately ask for Nearmap services. I had come from San Antonio River Authority where we had been using Nearmap for several years, and I had been spoiled by it, and you'll see why later. I was asked to hold off on that purchase at first. Texas actually has a centralized sort of GIS resource called TNRIS, the Texas Natural Resources Information System. They actually might have recently rebranded, so I apologize if I'm quoting them wrong. They provide a Google imagery statewide service that I was asked to evaluate, and it is a great program and it is a great imagery service, but it also depends on your needs. And so we spent some time evaluating other options, but moving into the next fiscal year, I did ask for Nearmap, and I worked with Nearmap to sort of make a budget-friendly request because I knew that if I could get my users to see Nearmap and what it could do, that it would be justified. At that time, the GIS budget was very small, and so it did get approved, but the Nearmap services alone were about 1/3 of my entire budget for the year, but it was worth it. I mentioned a few things here later in the timeline. Nearmap was so popular that we realized we didn't have coverage in some of our key areas, and so Nearmap worked with me and coordinated with some other entities to expand coverage for all of Comal County, and I'll talk about that in more detail later. And then just this past fall, we were able to finally get an enterprise agreement with Esri, and that has really taken GIS to the next level. So you'll hear me referencing that enterprise agreement a lot because it changed the resources we have and a lot of what we are doing and plan to do. And so a lot of where I'm at now is a redesign. We're 4 years in, and I'm ready to kind of take it to GIS 2.0. And this past year in our budget, engineering approved adding to our actual budget to fly the rest of Caldwell County, where we have a key water pipeline project going on. So to me, that's a huge testament to the usefulness and the value of Nearmap, that my users were able to see that value and put money in the budget to expand what we had available. So I'm not going to go in great detail about these or read them or anything. My point with this slide and the next slide is I did immediately set up a strategic plan for our GIS program with a vision and a mission and key goals. And each year I do a work plan that sort of gives a quarterly overview of what we're trying to accomplish. I think that this is very important when setting up a new GIS program, but particularly when you're trying to justify a budget. This is what speaks to that executive management level. And I think targeting some of those users, obviously targeting whoever approves your budget and making sure they see the value of GIS is important. So I usually do always encourage people to actually write up a plan explain what GIS is doing for the agency, what is your return on investment, and keep this updated and keep it meaningful. So this is just our current vision and mission, focusing a lot on our regional role as an entity, and then building out GIS as a tool for a central system of record and document access and various things that really help save everyone time and create efficiencies. So I'm going to go through these also kind of quickly. Sorry, I'm trying to rearrange my screen. I've got some things in the way. These are the actual goals from that strategic plan. There's just a few I want to highlight. Like I mentioned, system of record, easy access from any device, anywhere. So those are crucial to GIS being truly useful, especially when you have a large operations team with a lot of field staff. Nearmap is helpful in that because it's a service, right? So I can just drop it into our GIS portal, which I'm going to show you, and make it available for any of our field data collection apps, which is a very big part of how we use GIS here at GBRA. Because of that, it improves business workflows and streamlines operations, and I'm going to show you specific examples of that. So again, as I mentioned, that strategic plan really helps to sort of quantify and have something you can reference at budget time on why you're doing what you're doing and what you're asking for. So the system we have set up at GBRA is Enterprise GIS. So we have a GIS server, the Enterprise portal, which is the primary way that users use GIS at GBRA. We are mostly web GIS. I have very few desktop users. And then a lot of apps and field data. So along with asset management, we realized we needed to do a lot of asset inventory. So we got all of the operators' iPads, and each division now has their own Aero GPS units, and they've been trained on using GIS to field collect data, or even just to provide me feedback and edits on the existing data. I'm not a utility operator by trade, and so having communication and dialogue, even through technology, the dialogue through the technology is very helpful to have us working as a team and making sure the data is updated and reliable. We are an Esri shop, so I did want to mention people, I think, especially if you're another administrator, you're kind of curious on what people have set up. So we are upgraded to 10.9.1. I'm holding off a little on moving to Enterprise 11. I'll wait until 11.1 comes out. But we do make full use of server and portal and a lot of the different configurable apps within Enterprise. And I'll show you examples of those. And then, as I said, we do a lot of field data collection. So we are in the process of migrating over fully to field maps. That's part of our work plan this year. But we do still use a lot of collector and survey 1, 2, 3 as legacy. We're in the process of training everyone on field maps and just getting them comfortable with using that. It's also helped to have our enterprise agreement now that's really expanded our licensing. So a lot more people are able to interact and edit data than could before. And we do use quick capture as well. Anyone familiar with Esri products knows that each is unique for its own purpose. As I mentioned, we're mostly a web GIS shop. I do have a few desktop users. When I started at GBRA, there was only 3 licenses for desktop, and that was all they had for GIS, period. Now almost everyone accesses GIS through portal or through a field app, but we do have some engineers that do water modeling and wastewater modeling, and they use desktop GIS and they use Nearmap with their desktop GIS. So this is sort of a compiled view of our portal. The way it's structured now, it's hard to get a good screenshot, but I put it in here because almost every one of these viewers has Nearmap as a service and it's very relied upon. I pulled out just a few examples of our more popular apps. These are the ones that were at the top of the line. So this is the road services area. This is for engineering to monitor development in one of our very rapidly growing wastewater service areas. And you can see here that Nearmap imagery is down at the bottom of the layer list. I am a little sensitive because I'm in the process of redesigning our entire portal. So these viewers are they're kind of my old viewers. They're still in use, but I'm making them using Experience Builder and really enhancing the tools and the look and the user interface for these. So Nearmap imagery here with roads on top. I will tell you if Nearmap for whatever reason isn't working, which usually it's just something on my end that I need to correct, I hear about it immediately. It's one of the ways that I know that portal is getting used. Similarly, in one of our other more operational viewers, Hayes Caldwell, Nearmap is there in the layer list. It's in all our maps. Nearmap is a common term at GBRA. Everyone knows what it means at this point. And again, different viewer, same thing. And you can see I have Nearmap turned on, and so you can see the coverage, which I'll talk about in a little more detail in a minute. So I wasn't going to do a live demo because I didn't want anything on my system to kind of cause problems, but these are what our viewers look like that we use every day. This is some of our deputy division managers of operations and plant managers out in the field collecting data. Most of our field maps also use Nearmap, which can be very helpful. We are in a very rapidly developing part of the country, and I'll show a little bit of that in Nearmap imagery later. But I included this to mention that this is my upper level management. So it's not just field staff that are out there in the field or interacting with Nearmap. It's our general managers, our executive managers, our plant managers, and division managers. So I've kind of mentioned this a little, but the actual users we have at GBRA, we have about 200 employees. Most of the GIS users are engineering and operations, but we do have users from all departments, including, you know, like I said, the management team, our environmental science. Just a handful of desktop users. We just don't use a lot of desktop. I mean, myself and my GIS analysts do a lot, but most of the rest of the agency uses Portal and WebGIS. Looking at Portal, we have about 140 users, with 60 being very active or active. Those are my definitions, but that usually means if they either log in daily or weekly. So it is become a standard tool for the workday for pretty much a large chunk of folks at GBRA. And then we have about 20 to 30 active mobile workers. It really depends on what's going on operationally, what they're needing to do, if we are needing to do a field data collection effort, that sort of thing. So this again is that same jurisdiction and watershed boundary from the earlier map. I wanted to show our Nearmap coverage. This is where it gets interesting. I mentioned that Google Imagery Service, which is statewide, that I was asked to evaluate. But Nearmap really, it's flown more often, so there's different flights depending on where you are with the Nearmap coverage. But along the corridor of 35, which is where a lot of our facilities are, they fly 3 times a year. So that relevancy, that up-to-date imagery is really helpful. And then the resolution, the high resolution is incredibly helpful. And I'm going to show some examples of that. So along 35, all the little stars are just different GBRA facilities. I mostly just wanted to show why we did choose Nearmap. Even though it doesn't cover our whole jurisdiction, it absolutely covers where we have most of our areas of work and concern. These two counties here, Comal and Caldwell, are where I mentioned earlier that we expanded the coverage of Nearmap because we wanted to capture more of our facilities. Caldwell was just flown at the end of 2022 around Christmas, and we have these projects going on. And so that's been really great. It's been used a lot already in the past 2 or 3 months. So I'm going to go over some specific examples of using Nearmap. I tried to think of as many as I could, and I had engineering and operations chime in as well. One of my first tasks, there was not only not a GIS program, but there wasn't any GIS data really. So linear asset data development was one of my first tasks. When I started 4 years ago, it was just me. I've had a GIS analyst now for since last May, so almost a year, which has been amazing. But for a while, it was just me. So it was a lot of data development and georeferencing plans. You can see that this is a brand new subdivision under development. This can be really helpful that Nearmap flies so often because it can make a huge difference for referencing and data development when you can see features on the aerial, obviously. So having these build-outs captured has helped us a lot. And then for people who maybe haven't used Nearmap, the resolution is so good, you can easily see manholes and many other, obviously, surface features. But when you spend a lot of time mapping out wastewater collection systems, the ability to see these features is amazing. Before I click to the next image, I did want to say I didn't actually spend any time picking out this example. I just went into one of our subdivisions and zoomed into a manhole, and I was like, well, we'll take it with Nearmap and then we'll turn on the Esri base map. And this is what the Esri base map would have looked like. So again, incredibly helpful to have that high resolution, up-to-date imagery. This is just another example, a different part of our basin out in our well fields and water lines. You can see the vault feature along the water line clearly. And if you were to look at it with an Esri base map, that feature kind of disappears. We do have folks out in the field collecting data, but as often as I can, if we can see things on the imagery and create the data ourselves, that's obviously what we're going to do. It saves a lot of time and resources to be able to do this stuff from a desktop. Some other examples, George mentioned the historical data, which has been really valuable for us too. Different questions will come up. We had some gate failures in our hydro dams that really changed the situation of our lakes. And so that first image was a more recent image of the river, and this is how it was historically. So looking at these images, sometimes even doing analysis on these images has been really helpful for us in some of these projects. This is a similar situation on a different part of the river where we can see how things are now and then historically where the water was. This has come up a lot and helped with environmental management, particularly as the lakes are drawn down. Also development, so this is again a different part of the basin where we have this entire subdivision here is our wastewater collection system. This is how it was probably back in like 2019, and this is where it is now and continuing to develop. So Nearmap has been very valuable for us in all of our wastewater, but particularly in dealing with this subdivision in this area of the watershed. This is the 35 corridor right here, so rapidly populating. It's used a lot in line locates, so that saves our operators a lot of time. They will get an email coming in when you call Texas 811 about digging or any development. They can usually get into the GIS and look at the near map imagery and decide whether or not that line locate is going to be relevant to us versus having to drive out anywhere and do an on-the-ground evaluation. Our engineering team also uses it quite a bit to evaluate easement encroachment. We have several cross-county pipelines that are in areas that are rapidly developing. So we've mapped out easements, and they will regularly sort of do a review to see if there's easement encroachment. Another example just came up last week where one of our engineering managers asked me, can we put, we have a line relocation happening, and he said, can we put the new right-of-way onto near map so the appraisers can take a look at the near map imagery, because it was just flown, you know, late December, early January. And so we set up a web map for us to be able to do that. And again, that's actually saving the time and expense of sending out surveyors, which can be very significant. Right-of-way maintenance. This is another very recent example where our executive manager of operations called me and he said, you know, Mysti, they wanted to, one of the divisions was asking for money for doing right-of-way maintenance. So I went in and looked at the near map and I evaluated which areas actually need maintenance and which don't. And so he was on his own. He thought to go and use near map for this. And then he informed me too that I needed to do some spatial corrections of our data. So I just trained this team to go out and do some GPS data collections. So just another way that without really any advertising from me, I do go to department meetings and I will pull up our GIS portal and sort of continual training, not just training one time, but all the time, reminding them of what's available to them. But near map in particular hasn't needed a lot of reminding. They find it to be a very valuable tool. And we also do a lot of construction inspection. We have a team of maybe six guys who are out there on all these projects doing construction. They're using the quick capture to do a lot of their inspection photos, and having the near map has been really helpful for them so they can see features updated on the ground. Sometimes they don't have to go out in the field, but when they're there, it can help orient them. Or we've also used it historically to verify some situations between us and contractors. So this is some of that Caldwell imagery I mentioned that we just paid to have flown because we have brand new well fields and brand new project out in a really rural part of the county. Rural for now, at least. And similarly, we're doing an expansion of this wastewater plant. So the near map imagery has been very helpful. It's been in our board presentations because we can show the advancement of all of the different expansion of the facilities there at this wastewater treatment plant. And then just a little more traditional use, we do make at times some nice maps. We have a park up by the lake, and this is near map imagery. This is a huge poster that's printed out at the park showing the different features along the trail. And it's nice to have the near map imagery. For this park as well, I had recently given a presentation and mentioned near map because when the staff here first started collecting all their features, because we were making a native app for the park to use, for visitors to use, we didn't have near map at the time. It didn't cover this far out into the county. This is Comal County. So we actually flew a drone and used drone to map and created our own imagery, which took, you know, a couple days of my team manager's time and then my time. Well, later, you know, once we had the coverage of Comal County, those again are tasks that don't need to happen, free time that gets, and resources that get made available because we have the near map imagery. So it's been nice to have it expanded to this part of the county. Those are sort of my specific use cases. I'm happy to take questions at the end if I overlooked anything or you guys want to know about anything else. Thank you.